Hey everyone, so today we're going to dive into a pretty big idea called learnography. The thinking behind it is that we need to completely rewire how we approach learning, starting right in the classroom. Let's jump in.
All right, let's kick things off with a question I think everyone has asked themselves at some point. Why is it that we forget so much of what we learn in school? I mean, you spend years and years soaking up all this information, and yet so much of it just disappears. That one simple question is really the problem that learnography sets out to solve.
So, first things first, before we can talk about a new solution, we really need to understand why the old way isn't working as well as it could. We need to dig into the core problems with how we've been teaching for generations.
When you look at the research, a few big challenges pop up again and again. You've got poor student engagement, which isn't a surprise, and, like we just said, really low knowledge retention. A huge part of the problem is that our system often acts like every student's brain is wired the exact same way, which we know isn't true. It relies way too much on what's called passive cognitive instruction, which is basically just sitting still, listening to a lecture, and trying to memorize stuff. But that's just not how our brains are actually built to learn effectively. Okay, so that brings us to Section 2, Introducing Learnography. This is being presented as the answer, a totally new approach that's designed from the ground up to work with our brain's natural wiring instead of fighting against it. So what is this thing exactly? Well, at its core, learnography is a brain-based paradigm. And the most important shift is right there in the definition. It wants to move us away from the idea of teaching at someone and focus instead on transferring knowledge directly by using the brain's own built-in circuitry. And you can really see the difference when you put them side by side. Traditional teaching, it's passive, it's verbal, it's mostly about listening. Learnography, on the other hand, is active and motor-based. It flips the script from being teacher-led to student-led, and instead of just focusing on instruction, the whole goal is to activate the specific brain circuits you need to actually build that knowledge. And this right here is the absolute core of the whole idea. Learnography argues that we humans have this incredible, unique power, the connection between our brains and our hands, the ability to use our arms and hands as powerful tools for learning. The idea is that the physical act of building something, of creating, of manipulating objects, that's not just for crafts. That's actually how we can physically transfer knowledge into our brains. So how does this knowledge transfer actually work in practice? It all comes down to a really cool core concept they call the Brainpage. Now, a Brainpage isn't something you can hold, right? It's a neural map, a representation of knowledge that you create and strengthen right inside your own brain. A great way to think of it is like a personal mental workbench, where you are actively assembling and organizing everything you're learning. So how do you go about building one of these? Well, it's basically a three-step process. It all starts with motor engagement. That means physically interacting with the information, using your hands, not just listening to it. Then comes structured practice, which is all about reinforcing those new pathways in your brain through meaningful repetition. And finally, there's spatial reasoning, where you consciously organize that information on your mental workbench. And listen, this isn't just some abstract educational theory. It's all grounded in real neuroscience. The whole Brainpage process is specifically designed to light up a whole network of key brain structures. The parts responsible for planning, for memory, for coordinating movement. It's about getting your entire system firing together to lock in that learning. All right, so this brain-based approach doesn't just change how students learn facts better. It actually completely transforms their role in the classroom. Let's take a look at that journey. A student's journey in this system has three key stages. They start off in pre-training. Learning the fundamentals. But pretty quickly they graduate to being pre-trained. And this is where it gets interesting. They become a small teacher, somebody who's now able to guide their peers. And the final goal? To become a transformer, a confident person who isn't just reciting facts, but can actually innovate and lead. And this quote, I think, just perfectly captures the whole philosophy. Every student develops as a small teacher in system learnography. See, the goal isn't just to create a classroom of passive listeners. It's about empowering every single student to become an active leader in their own education. So, where does this all lead? What's the end game here? Let's zoom out and look at the ambitious, long-term vision that learnography is painting for the future of education. Yeah, the vision it's huge. It all starts with that idea of turning every student into a small teacher. Doing that totally transforms classrooms from quiet lecture halls into these buzzing, active workplaces of knowledge. A really key goal here is to remove cognitive barriers for all children, to make learning accessible even for kids with autism or ADHD. It's all about making knowledge transfer direct, efficient, and engaging for every single brain. And then there's this. This might be the most radical piece of the entire vision, the number 20. That is the age by which Learnography aims for a person's formal education to be completed. The whole idea is to empower young people with real independence and workforce skills much, much earlier, instead of keeping them in a system that might not be serving them anymore.
So the mission is basically the roadmap for how to achieve that big vision. It means officially replacing the old teaching paradigm with a new learning one based on motor science. It means getting rid of homework because the learning actually happens at school. It even means creating miniature schools right inside the classroom to foster teamwork. It's all part of designing a universal model that could work anywhere in the world.
And that brings us to our final thought. Learnography proposes a fundamental shift, right? It's moving away from a model of just passive listening to one of active physical creation. It really makes you wonder, could the future of learning, of building real, lasting knowledge in our brains, be quite literally in our own two hands?